Hello, everybody. This is Mike Sokol from RV Electricity, uh, broadcasting from high atop Funkstown Hill. Yes, there is a Funkstown, and glad to be with you today. So this is going to be my first mic on open mic session here. So if you have any comments, questions, anything, please post them here. And I will be here for the next hour. This will be recorded so you can watch things later if you want. Um, so let's just kind of get into it here. So I'm going to change a connection here so I can look at something. Here we go. So I did have an earlier question that said, can you post something in advance? And I said, sure. And the question was all about this idea of could you have a one of these? I believe this was the question. Could I use one of these double connections? It's a double Y connection. So on the one side, I believe what they're asking about is being able to plug into a 50 amp pedestal and go ahead and convert it to a pair of 30s. Now, here's the issue. This is possible and this will work. What we have to always worry about things like this is kind of like the slippery slope. Of course, the real problem here is this. If you go look down here, we have a 50 amp on this side, and we have 30 amp extension cords or cords power plugged into it. The National Electrical Code is a little leery about things like this because it would allow you, in fact, to draw more than 30 amps on this line before this 50 amp breaker would trip. Now, it's hard to think like this, but the circuit breakers are not there to protect you or to protect your RV. They're to protect the wiring between you and your RV. So if you're very, very careful, I've seen people do this very successfully. It is a minor code violation, but there's all kinds of gadgets available to allow you to do that. I don't think it's terribly dangerous unless you start stacking extra connectors on the end of the 30 and have the ability to draw more than 30 amperes down the line. Still, you want to always be careful with something like this that you don't get into any kind of trouble with overheating connections and wiring. So you're going to want to monitor wiring very carefully if you do it. So it's not a fabulous idea. I don't think anybody's going to give you a lot of trouble over it. I do get worried when you go the 50 on the one side down to the 15s because that then allows you to plug these tiny little extension cords on there. So I think those are to be avoided. But the double 50 to 30 probably is okay as long as you're careful with it. So let's just kind of do that. Whoops. I'm just losing my mind here. There we go. Here I'm back. Okay, so now Rafio, well, that's a great name, isn't it? Asks, okay, so let me just switching another gadget around here. I need more video screens. I really do. I've only got like 3 in front of me. And so he says, why does my Class A have 2 battery switches and 2 inverter switches? One bat and one inverter turns in back basement of coach, then a battery toggle switch on the entrance wall. Wow. I'm curious what kind of coach this is. That seems a little odd, but I've seen some pretty crazy things that I don't seem to have any. There doesn't seem to be any good rhyme or reason for why they do that. So Rafio, and by the way, that is the coolest name I think we're gonna have all night. I'm hoping that's how you say it. If you will email me the question directly with a little bit more of background on what this thing is, I'll see if what I can do about it and come up with some ideas. How does that sound? Okay, so What if I use two campers on 150 amp service? I would not do, but what about the grounding issues? Actually, there should not be any grounding issues if you do this. I'm assuming you're talking about the same kind of conductor. Um, the ground continues at both sides, the neutral continues at both sides. The question all becomes about, can you overload that 30 amp your 30 amp cord? If they were to build a little box that split that out, that had a pair of 30 amp breakers, one for each side, which is what I would do, there would be absolutely no question that it would be completely safe and to code. But should not be a grounding issue, shouldn't be a neutral return issue. Think that that's okay. Rafio, Tiffin Motorhome. I do know the guys at Tiffin. I can ask them, but not probably during this broadcast here, or I should say this netcast, this webcast. What are we doing nowadays? I lose track. Or are you guys doing okay out there? Luckily, my wife is a really, really good cook, and she's always had extra stuff stashed away. So we're okay for food. I think we are going to put in a big garden though this spring, so we can have more fresh vegetables. I think we're going to be okay. Even though I don't look like it, I'm well fed. So all good out there. So as long as you got food and toilet paper, I figure we're doing okay. Okay, what else do we have for questions? Anybody at all? Okay, a couple of other things come to mind. There was a question over on my Facebook group. And if you're interested, I know a lot of you guys are a little worried about Facebook. I try to be very, very careful with it. But there's a question about, can I plug my Tesla in the 50 amp one to charge, plus something in the 30, my RV in the 30, plus hang something else on the 20. And I've promised to go into that in some detail. That's likely okay. They are wired inside that they can do that. That is, the pedestals are, and they probably are hooked up with heavy enough wire. The problem becomes once you start getting more than one or two of them on that loop doing this, you're likely to trip the main circuit breaker feeding that. This is because campgrounds, just like your own home system, they are not designed that you can run every single circuit breaker at full capacity. It won't hurt anything, but it will start tripping breakers if you attempt to do that. The big question becomes, campground's going to have to pay for this thing. So that overnight charge on a Tesla, and it will take overnight to do it, could probably add, I have to run some calculations in my head, probably $10, $15 of electric bill to them that they may not have been expecting. I would assume that if a campground sees you charging your Tesla up, they are not going to be happy and may ask you to disconnect. I do think it may be a possible value adder for campgrounds if they were to allow near the entrance a number of charging stations to be put in for electric vehicles. I am not sure that Tesla superchargers should be everywhere. They don't really charge anything else other than a Tesla. But there's a lot of other options out there. So I think that could be the wave of the future. And by the way, do not assume that you're going to have Class A battery-powered RVs anytime soon. Batteries are nowhere near there. And do not assume that you're going to have air conditioners that are efficient enough and solar panels and batteries that you're going to be able to run fully air-conditioned systems, except for some experimental ones, but retrofitting that to an existing motorhome, especially a Class A that may have 3 air conditioners, that's kind of wishful thinking. So I don't think so. Okay, so here we go. We have another question here. I have a 50 amp 240 volt plug for my electric car charger, and I wanted to use it to run my 30 amp RV. So I attached my 50 amp male to 30 amp female dog bone and then plugged the RV 30 amp power cord to that. Wow, that is a very serious code violation, and I'll tell you why. Usually, what they do, or likely why, let's just say, usually what they do for those 50 amp, 240 volt outlets that they use for a car charger do not have a neutral on them. They're 240 volts only. They're basically a welding outlet. So it'll have L1, L2. Let me see. Let's go to the little gadget that I just hooked up. See if this works. Okay, so what you're going to end up with in this case, you're going to have two separate things, L1, L2, and okay, so this would be, yeah, L1, line 1, line 2, and a ground. And this is going to be, if we measured across here, we're going to have 240 volts. Now, the problem with that, if you go try to take this very same thing, let's say that your RV, though, which your RV is looking for, and your 30 amp one, it's looking for a hot, a neutral, and a ground. And what you're doing is, instead of connecting that neutral to the actual neutral, you have no neutral probably in that. What you've done is you've connected the neutral, you've jury-rigged and done the neutral over to the ground coming back. And the problem with that is that ground wire is not designed to accept the full amount of current available from the hot. So what you've done is created kind of like this cross connection inside. That is a huge code violation for a lot of good reasons. One of which is if you burn up your ground wire there that's being used as a neutral, now the entire body of your RV or your Tesla or whatever where you're plugging into can in fact develop a hot skin condition. So I can't recommend that at all. I know that there's guys that make plugs like that. But wow, I think it's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so let's go back to me. There we go. Why didn't that fry the IV? Okay, says, why didn't it fry it? Well, okay, because you did not exceed the amount of current that ground could take. So again, in the future, you don't want to do it. You could do it for a while. And look, I used to tell my students all the time, I would be doing big rock shows. I said, there are things that I would do on occasion to make the show go on no matter what. But that's not something I would leave for anybody else, and it's not something I would ever do other than an emergency. I wouldn't even do this in an emergency unless you very carefully monitor it and you know what you're doing. I wouldn't do it, and I know what I'm doing. So no, don't do it. Now, if you had a 1450 connector, so that becomes the big question. If you had what's called a NEMA 1450, which looks like a standard RV connection, and then used a 50 amp to 30 amp dog bone, then it would be okay because it would be 4-wire. But I'm pretty sure it's not. Everyone that I've seen that's been installing this stuff did not connect both legs. Yes, both legs. Let's see. Okay, so let's talk about, go over the usual culprits that creates hot skin voltage on the outside of a coach. Nope, I have not discussed it earlier, but that is one of the things that I've written about extensively over the years. Okay, so basically, here's what's got to happen. You need two different things to occur in order to create a hot skin contact voltage condition. And the first one is you have to have lost what's called your EGC ground, or your equipment grounding conductor. And that's that little ground wire that you see, going back the little U-shaped thing in the plug. And consequently, if that has failed, then it can't be there to take care of any fault currents. Now, even an RV that's got nothing wrong with it inside will have a certain amount of leakage currents. That is, everything leaks. I mean everything. And especially things like converter chargers and such, everything leaks a milliamp or two of current. And so what usually happens is your voltage of your RV kind of settles into like somewhere between halfway between 0 and 120 volts. So a lot of times I'll see 60 volts of hot skin voltage, and what that does is can give you a slight tingle, and everybody thinks that everything's okay at that point. However, you're just one step away from having a massive condition, and that usually happens either somebody's drilled a hole through a wall and run a screw into a wire and shorted it out. That's one way to do it. Another one that occurs a fair amount of times is your hot water heater element. Your water heater element has been melted down because you forgot to put water in it before you turn your electric back on, and it only takes seconds to burn that thing up. Now, when the water does come in, it contacts the wire directly, and that leaks maybe an ampere or two of current through. And I usually see them going to up to about 80 volts or more. And that's a very deadly, dangerous condition. So, yeah, so those are the main two things. First off, you have lost the ground. Now, where's the ground get lost? I see sometimes people have old dog bone adapters that fall apart, or you'll plug into a garage outlet that was maybe wired without a ground. That can do it. You do not want to use one of those little ground lift adapters that you see all the time that you can buy on Lowe's for $1. Those things are deadly, deadly. So you may say, okay, I just have to run an extension cord to charge my batteries. It's not going to use much power, and that is true. However, if you have broken that ground connection, now the RV has the ability to go all the way up to 120 volts. It only takes 30 volts to be dangerous. So you want to be extremely careful with grounds. So those are the two things that happen. Now, 50 amp. Okay, so Ken says, is there any advantage of using a 50 amp to 15 amp or 20 direct dog bone versus a 15 to 30 to 15 using two dog bones? Yeah, and I think I've got that here. Let me see, 1 second. I do have that for your viewing pleasure. So let me go to the overhead cam here, if I've done this right, I think. Dun, 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 dun. There we go. So here's what's going on. What you're saying is, on the one side, you want to be able to plug this in like a home outlet. And so you could use that to a 30 amp and then a 30 amp connection like that, like so, right here, right? Bonk, over to a 50 amp. And so what you've got, you basically have got a 15 on the one side to a 50 amp on the other side. The only disadvantage of that really is now you've got this extra hunk of stuff in the middle. You have extra connections and that kind of stuff. Although I've seen a number of them that'll actually have a unit that'll hook right onto the side of your RV on your shore power inlet, and it's got a twist lock adapter that goes on there, and then it just has a little 15 amp plug kind of hanging down, which means that now you can take a nice heavy duty 12 gauge extension cord, run it out to your RV, charge your batteries, do basic light things on it. You'll never be able to do more than perhaps start one air conditioner, but I wouldn't even trust that a lot with something like that. But what you do not want to do is use a skinny little extension cord. Sad to say, heavy extension cords are your friends. When we would do rock shows, I would run, hundreds of meters of what's called 4/0 cable. And there would be like 5 conductors of them. Each one would be thicker than your thumb. And once you get those on pallets, with 100 foot of 5 conductors of that, you can't even pick it up. We have to have a fork truck. So there you go. So somebody says, Ken says, I use the 50, 30, 15 in case the 50 amp plug doesn't work at a campground. And, I have boxes full of adapters. I know everybody accuses me of carrying too much stuff. But I used to take my Sprinter and I would drive this thing 3,000 miles solo from Maryland to Seattle in 3 days, sometimes all by myself. So that, I guess, what solo means. And when I'd get there, I would have to do things. And I couldn't count on anything extra being there or anyone to help me. So I would carry wacky things. I'd carry spare wheel bearings, spare V belts, spare fuel filters, spare, I would carry ladders with me. Every kind of gadget you can possibly imagine, umbrellas, gaff tape, spare oil, spare filters, every kind of Torx wrench you can imagine. It's just that I've been in so many wacky situations where I was able to put things together on the side of the road. And I happen to have, I not only have a mechanical engineering and electrical engineering background, I was a young mechanic. When I was like 16 years old, I worked in a truck stop. I helped rebuild big inline 6-cylinder diesel engines. I know how to, I know I will not rebuild your diesel engine for your pusher. I will not, but I know how to do it. Golly, I used to change out stuff on my Sprinter all the time. That had an inline 5 on it. So Jose Montez, I believe, says first time live. Hello from Riverside, California. Are you guys enjoying this? Is this a good format for you? I'm just trying to find out the really important questions that you have, and then I'll go ahead and create little specific 10-minute like mini classes on each of these areas. Okay, thanks. Okay, so Ken says, thanks for the opportunity. My first time on YouTube, but have followed you for years. You and Gary Bunzer never cease to amaze. Gary, I know he's still fighting, COVID-19 out in Seattle, and he's still on a ventilator apparently. But we're hoping and praying he's going to do fine. But I've been to tons of his seminars. He's been to tons of mine. And I think I posted on one of my RV travel things today. The last time we were together in Hershey, he's quite the guitar player, and I am a keyboard player. And I said, next time I'm coming to Hershey, I'm bringing a little sound system and some keyboards and a spare guitar, and we're going to have a jam session. And I'll hand out some, tambourines and shaky toys for people, and we'll have a big drum circle. I think it would be a ton of fun. To do that. So we're hoping that the power of music, power of prayer, and the power of positive thoughts helps Gary get better, because I really am looking forward to a jam session. Plus, I owe him a beer. I don't think he should let that go, because the last time we were in Goshen, we were at a bar, he got the last round and we were one round off and I had to go. And I said, Gary, next time we're out here, I'm buying the next round of beer. So I still owe him a beer? I mean, come on, Gary. You get better so we can take care of that. Look at this. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Look at that. So I've got some guys from all around the North America here. This is fabulous. Okay, so Rafio says, direct questions. The best ones right now, I'm in the middle of creating a new RV electricity account to kind of get that straight. But the best one right now is Mike at noshockzone.org. And you guys all know me from No Shock Zone. I've done this for like 10 years. And that's where most of these questions come in. In another week or so, I'm going to have my other accounts up. But right now, I've just got too many things to do at once. So yeah, Mike at, and I'll post it in this YouTube thing once we get done. So yeah, Mike at noshockzone.org. And you can always post questions here too on YouTube, and I will see those. So, hey, this is working okay. Okay, Marlboro, New Jersey. One of my good friends and business partners was from up in Red Bank. I'm not sure where Marlboro is, but I used to make that trek to New Jersey all the time. And he lived very, very close to, I guess, the shore. We would apparently sometimes go slumming, and we would go drive down to see where John Bon Jovi's house was, which looked like a big golfing estate, big thing. And we would just drive around just looking at all this stuff. But I'd say, why do these guys have this in Jersey? And he said, well, they grew up here. And that was one of the things that they dreamed of, was having a mansion on the shores, including Bruce Springsteen, guys like that. And still, on occasion, you could go into a small club, it might seat 100, 150 people, and Springsteen be in there playing. That's also one of the things I love about Nashville, because I've been in Nashville tons of times doing all kinds of work. And when you're bopping around there, you never know who you're going to see actually playing in at Tootsie's, Orchid Lounge, which is kind of a little hole in the wall. But it's just probably one of my favorite little bars in the world, just to go kind of hang out with. And people are just, guys come in to play their songs, and they're just playing for tips, just so they try out songs on an audience. You buy them a beer and that kind of stuff. So here I have another one. Okay, somebody looking for replacement duplex shallow with screw terminals to replace pinch devices. The hardware duplexes are too deep. I am doing some research on that, in fact. And so the problem here is that the receptacles that many times are installed in RVs that have a shallow wall, they don't have proper screws on it. What they do is and they don't even have a place for stab connection. They actually have what I call like these little vampire connections, like a little slot that they push the wire in that just kind of clamps down on it. And that's okay for low amperage connections, but I really worry about those things when it comes to drawing steady power for, say, electric space heaters. And I think that electric space heaters have to be evaluated very, very carefully before I put something like that in an RV, simply because of the overloading wire problems. Here in my little part of Maryland, out in Western Maryland, we get at least several house fires every year. In fact, I've had a couple here in Hagerstown, where I'm just outside of. And they're in a home now, not an RV, but what has happened is, guys have strung a few of those 15 amp surge strips together. And those things, let me see, I think I've got one right here. You never want to plug a space heater into something like this. They're just not rated for the continuous power. I mean, you can put computers in it and phone chargers and all that other kind of stuff. But these, just about every time I've seen an instance of a fire in a house from a space heater, it's because you've got something like this, and then newspapers get piled on top of it, or carpeting, or clothing, or whatever. So it seems like what you're doing is kind of like asking for trouble. And then sadly, many of the houses that I've talked to fire marshals about, they don't have operational smoke detectors. And I'm hoping that you guys take that very seriously about your smoke detectors, making sure that those are operational. Same with the carbon monoxide. I know a lot of the new ones probably have direct 120 volt hardwired, but you've got to make sure that that's, it'll be, I guess, off the 12 volt system, but you've got to make sure that everything's operating. You should be testing that. So David Little, that's one of the things that I'm doing a little bit of research, and I will do an article on that once I find what I think is a decent replacement. I think I talked about this over my other forum. My twin boys bought a house a year or so ago, and have turned the basement into what they originally called the man cave, but is actually the gaming room. They have, I help them. It's one of my great fun things, is to help them learn about, 1980s circuitry and computers and such, because they get those big, massive, 6-foot tall gaming consoles and vintage pinball machines and everything, which is a lot of fun. However, what we did was we put in dozens of receptacles all around the room. We properly, we got it all inspected. That is, we pulled the permits, we got it inspected, we did everything exactly right. And it only cost a couple $100 more to put like premium outlets throughout the whole place, as opposed to the cheap ones that cost the cheap ones cost less than $1 a piece. And we put a separate service panel in, and we did everything that we could think of. The sad part is in your RV, there's just not a depth for in many cases without building some kind of a build out box. So I'm still looking for the right solution. When I find something like that, I'm going to post it. I'll post it on. How many of you guys here, you realize I have a Facebook page, which I think I think we're like 7,000 members, something like that, or very close to it. It's just been growing like crazy, and there's a lot of really, really smart people on there, and some great moderators that are helping to grow this thing. So I'm pretty happy with how that's working. There's just lots to do. Okay. Our newer RVs coming with AC versus DC powered smoke or CO detectors. Guessing you would have to have inverters. The ones that I have seen, they're running off of 12 volt DC, which runs off your battery, which means you don't need to have an inverter. But again, I could I could be corrected on that. If anybody knows, PM me or whatever over, and I'll do an article on that. Again, what I've done in my own house here is, we put in all the 10-year, lithium battery, non-replaceable units, which seems to be better. I'm right now fishing around. I don't currently have an RV for testing all of this stuff. So I am fishing around to see if I can actually get a budget together to build one of these things, start putting all this stuff together from scratch. I basically have everything I need for an RV. I mean, this is crazy because I have, I've got deep cycle batteries, I got lithium batteries, I've got inverters, converters, I got solar panels, I got air conditioners, I've got generators coming out of my ears. And what I really need to do is just get a basic, what I would really, really love to have would be one of those little live and light, like a 6x15 or 7x18 or whatever, just the ones, the little tip out things. That way I could start building in multiple batteries, multiple inlets, multiple, automatic generator transfer switches, on and on and on and on. I got lots to do. Let's see here. Okay, somebody's mentioned before that you should do a demo on plugging in space heaters into a power strips and show the power draw from these dangerous devices. I, in fact, have a standing invitation from my little fire hall around here, over in Halfway Fire Hall, that they want me to do a PSA for this fall. We're going to go take a space heater and put it on a skinny little extension cord and overload it on purpose so I can catch it on fire right on camera. And I'll go ahead, and I've got all the FLIR cameras and such, so we can kind of look at all that. And then they said, well, can we put a fire engine in the backdrop? Can we have a couple of guys step in with their turnout suits and extinguish it? And I went, I'm all in. A little difficult getting stuff happening right now, but yeah, that's one thing that I really, really want to do. Okay, so here we go. Here's another interesting one. Hi, Mike. In sunny Northwest Washington State, we have a modified sine wave inverter, not in position to upgrade to pure sine. What can I do to prevent damage to my computer when plugging in? By the way, or 50 amp. Okay, so I'm guessing this is a laptop. The real danger that you have on computers like this, modern modified sines are not as bad as the earlier ones. The older ones just had 30-40% distortion in them. The key here is it's not the computer generally that's damaged, it's the power supply to your computer. So if you have a laptop computer, the thing that's going to be put at risk will be your little power supply thing. So what you're going to want to do is monitor that very closely for any signs of overheating. I've noticed some of these get so hot you can't touch them when you're on a modified sine wave. I know that you probably do not want to plug an electric blanket with a modern digital controller in it, because I have dozens of emails from people that have fried those in seconds from plugging it in. So But I've gotten away with computers for hours at a time. I guess the best thing you can do is just monitor it and make sure it doesn't get hot. But you have to do this at your own risk. And I know everybody's on a tight budget. It's tough, but there's no magic gadget that you can plug into that modified sine wave thing that reduces it. Yes, I could develop a filter, but the filter would be big and ugly and cost as much as the pure sine inverter. So I don't have a good answer, but that would be a really, really good question for me to cover in a future article. I think that's fabulous. Uh, okay, so here's another good one. Any items, any items are 12 volt. What items are 12 volt drains when your fifth wheel is in the storage? Your propane detector and what else? I know your can you put a switch near the LP detector to turn it off in storage? I'm not sure you can get away with that legally. What they do, the safest thing to do when you're storing it is to put a battery disconnect switch, just connect the whole battery, but then add on an external float charger or a battery tenders, I guess is the one trademark brand name, to kind of keep your batteries at the correct level. And in fact, they would be able to maintain your smoke detector, your propane detector and such. I've had a number of people that have put their RV kind of in storage in the backyard, just plugged it into the regular two-stage battery charger that they had in their 10 or 15-year-old RV, and they came back after a few months and they had boiled all the water out of the batteries and the acid got everywhere and ate everything up. There's also been a number of recent fires in RVs that apparently the smoke detector wasn't turned on. Leaving things powered up without a way to monitor them is tricky. I know, for instance, one of the things that I'm working on is some of the security systems. What Abode is one that will allow you to go put like a remote camera, temperature monitor, and everything else out in something in your yard. If I was doing this and I wanted to have an RV out in my yard that was plugged in that I was using for backup or whatever, I would likely go ahead and add one of these separate monitors, like an Abode camera, temperature gauge, whatnot. I think that would be really, really smart. Is 2005 considered old? Okay, well that's 15 years old. 15 years old. The real question is, can you find the books on that describe how things are wired? There's been think about your 15-year-old computer. Does anyone have like that around? I do. I mean, I got stuff going back many, many years. Wait a minute, I might have something here. Hold on, nobody look at my crappy closet here. I just saw this the other day. Here it is. I'm going to show you something. This shows you how I collect things. Does anybody know what this is? Do you? It is a 14-inch platter out of a Winchester 3030 hard drive. It used to be a stack of, I think, 3 of these things, and it was good for all of 30 megabytes, not gigabytes, not terabytes, megabytes, right? So I saved this. I used to install these things like crazy. I didn't have the heart to throw this one last platter away. Every once in a while I get it out and look at it. Now this is probably 30-ish years old, that kind of a thing. But just remember, clank, 15 years is a long time when it comes to technology, just because all the computing power that they put in these things now. Square wave versus modified. Yes, square wave stuff is just evil. And I remember when I was a youngster and I had a square wave inverter, and we hooked the light bulb up to it, and you could actually watch the filament. You could actually hear it singing, and it just broke the filament in the light bulb. I think modern ones, if you have a sine, or I should say, a modified sine inverter that's less than 15 years old, you're probably okay. but I would look it up. You know, if it says it's got 35 or 50% harmonic distortion in it, I would worry about it. I have the advantage of I've got digital source scopes and I've got frequency analyzers and I've got all this kind of gadgets because this is what I actually do for a living. Um, so yeah, so pure. So David Little says, yeah, I come from an electronics background, anything computer related, pure sine wave only. Yep, I know. That's what we do. Uh, and we're really, really careful with that. In fact, I go back when I first started installing computers back in the early 70s. I learned on Fortran, and I helped actually work on, we installed an IBM 370, 360, 370, I think, on Corning Glass when I worked. We didn't have inverters back then, but the anti-brownout stuff was a huge motor generator set. And this thing was the size of a big washing machine. It had a huge flywheel in it, and a motor spun up a big generator. And then the flywheel kept things running in case there was a little bit of a brownout. But those were, that's how we had to do to keep things running back there in the 70s, early 70s. The thing was interesting, if that thing shut down, it would take something like 24 hours just to reload the operating system. You had to like start toggling this stuff in from hand and loading it in with those little punch cards. That's how far I go back on computers. So yeah, I get really worried with modified sine. But again, I've done it. But man, if you're going to do it, you got to be really, really careful with that. Does a Commodore 64? Oh my gosh. Yes, Commodore 64s are great, and things like that. You know, I had TRS 80s. All of that stuff was really cool because you bought your RAM in banks of 16K or 8K, 8,000 bytes. Okay, not 8 megs or 8 gigabytes or anything like that. And you know, our floppy drives held what, 175K, 360 kilobytes, not megabytes. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about how far computers have gotten just in the 45, 50 years that I've been working on them. Almost looks like almost looks like old style laser video disc. I know, but it's aluminum. You know, this is, like I said, there is data on here. You know, if you gave me enough money, enough time, I could actually fire this baby up, spin it up, and well, it's a few scratches in it, gather some data off of it. But you know, this is basically what you have inside of one of your spinning hard drives, although, you know, this big compared to 14s. They actually called them Winchester drives, if the legend goes, because there was a model 3030. And, you know, a 3030 is a Winchester gun, right? Like from the Wild West. And that's when they started calling them Winchesters. So I'm not sure that's true, but that's the legend. Let's see. So David, so you're giving away your age. David, Ken, you and I are the same age. Let me kill this. That's my dad calling. So Dad, I'm in the middle of something. I'll get back to you later. Ken, you and I are the same age. Okay, we don't have to give ages here. But yeah, I was born in 54, so yeah. Believe it or not, some of our American RV friends are worried about our Canadian electricity is not compatible. What do they think is wrong with it? I've been up in Canada a bunch of times. And I think, if anything, Canada has more stringent grounding rules than the American code. I've in my work for the pro audio business, you know, I've been involved in power, and I understand maybe 2 to 3 dozen different countries. So I could actually hook up your RV in India if you wanted to, or Britain, or wherever, but it gets tricky. So no, Canada appears to be absolutely fine if you can get over the shock of the currency exchange. You have what, toonies and loonies there, I believe, if I remember correctly. I don't have one right now. So Rob Saunders says, I was born in 54 too, before the space age. One of my fondest memories I think the summer that I turned 16, my parents and I were, I think, in Canada in a little Cox pop-up camper, and I got to listen to man land on the moon on an AM radio while I was building a little model rocket ship in a little Cox pop-up camper. So yeah, that's how far back I go with this stuff. So yeah, no. Before the space, we watched the space age come in. We did. Wait a minute, David. Now everybody's bragging an Altair 880. I did televideo computers. Oh man, the stuff that I played with, it was just crazy. Um, so let's see here. So Ryan J asks, is it possible to make your 12 volts in your RV smart? I have an Amazon Echo in the normal house, have smart switches allowing me to use my voice to control lights. You know, I've thought about that. In fact, that's one of the questions I've asked a couple of the guys that provide this stuff. I think it would be possible. One of the things that my kids and I have experimented with, and when I say kids, you know, my one son's 29 and my identical twins are like 26 and 26 plus 30 seconds. We've talked about just running PoE power all around the places when we're doing some expansions. And that's power over Ethernet, where basically you're running through the same RJ45 connection. You're running, I think you get about 15 watts through there. So it's enough to certainly run a light. And it also allows you to have IP control over that light, dimming it, colors, all that other kind of stuff. So it should be completely possible. Ryan, is this something that you might want to take on and send us? If you send me your direct information here, I've got this. I think I would love to collaborate with a couple of guys that are doing this just to kind of see how this all works. Much more to do. Let's see. My Airstream has schematics for Canadians and U.S. standards. So those Airstream guys, I mean, they're pretty anal about all of this kind of stuff. I do have an electrical engineer I know in Canada that I can ask, but everything that I've ever done in Canada has been exactly fine. Not so in France, not so in England, not so in Italy, not so in Japan, not so in Holland. And these are only ones that I know about. You can get in a lot of trouble if you don't quite know what you're doing. One of the advantages I have is having worked with sound crews, for music acts from all around the world. And we're always constantly going over color codes and connections and voltages and everything. Same as Americans. Canadian Standard Association. I am aware of that. So European voltages and plugs are definitely different, but Canada electricity is same as American designs. That is correct. Here's the really interesting thing, which I think is fascinating. This 60 hertz, 120, 240 volts, that is actually fairly modern here. Sometime for fun, I have a chart somewhere that shows all the various voltages and phases that we used to have and frequencies. So there was a 25 hertz thing. There was also a two phase circuit that was 90 degrees phase shifted as opposed to the three phase 120 degree shift that we know nowadays. All kinds of wacky voltages, all kinds of wacky starter currents. Yeah. So right now, the three phase in America here, the typical thing is three phase 120, 208, or coming for most businesses for low voltage. We normally have split phase 120, 240 coming into our residences and campgrounds. Although campgrounds now have the ability that they can actually run three phase 208 around to their pedestals, which is actually safe. Some guys are complaining, I need a full 240 volts. Most RVs really don't use the 240, even though you supply it. They have two separate 120 volt circuits. But if guys are not careful, you can accidentally inject all kinds of bad and dangerous voltages into RVs. Airstreams made for Europe are shipped over out as a shell and wired completely there. I would guess so because It's generally 230 volts over there. So here's an interesting thing, and I'm not sure if they still do it because of the chicken tax from the 1960s. Sprinters that were coming over here as cargo vans, from Germany, actually were built in Germany. They took them apart, pulled I guess, the engine and transmission and wheels and everything, and threw them in the back in a crate, brought them here as an assembly, and this would save something like 20% tariff on this. And then there's a plant here, someplace in one of the Carolinas, North or South Carolina, I can't remember where they basically just put them all back together simply to avoid what's called the chicken tax. I posted an article about it before. We can't go into it now, but man, that's really fun stuff, huh? Let's see, what else we got? Altair 880s. Da, 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 da. Okay, how are we doing for questions here? I'm going to do it for time. Look at that. Oh, the time has flown. We're up to 7:50 already. Okay, let's see. Bum, 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 bum. Go kill that. Okay, Ken, I have not personally encountered this. So he says, do you hear about a lot of failures for the electric on-off switch for suburban water heaters? I've had my share of them melting. The design has not changed for quite a while. I have not encountered that directly, but I get emails constantly, and I monitor a lot of these groups, and I have heard a lot of those failures. So I don't know what's going on with this, but that would be a really, really interesting thing to follow up on. What I'm attempting to do is see if I can find some kind of a grant that will allow me to spend more time doing this research. Right now, I'm buckling under the strain of actually having a real full-time job that actually pays the bills. This stuff doesn't pay the bills. This is what I'm just basically doing to try to help the RV industry. But if I can find a grant for this would allow me to go ahead and basically just not work outside. And I'm a research guy. I mean, this is what I used to do, and I go back stretching into the 70s when I was, a packaging machine robotics designer, in the 80s when I built, nuclear guidance systems, and I knew how to calibrate stuff down to parts per million, and then installing. Some of the first ATMs at banks before there was the internet. I mean, I've just done this stuff forever. I would love to do this for the RV industry. It just gets tough because right now, I'm running out of time to do this. Samsung Alarm Smart System. So Ryan J says, I have a Samsung Alarm Smart System installed on the something or other. Okay, so not sure. Okay, so let's see. So, okay, more information here is needed from Ryan. David Little says the Canada CSA has larger wire gauge required for both DC and AC than US. We get away with a lot of crazy downsizing stuff on occasion. Thicker is better, as it were. You will never lose power by going. I used to think that, when I was a kid, you had like a great big jumper cable that the electrons would somehow get lost in there. And they don't. They do better. I started, here's the thing. Here's the story. I started doing my electrical experiments when I was 4 years old by myself in a closet with a big dry cell battery and a little light bulb and a paperclip. Figuring this stuff out. I didn't learn this from my dad, sadly, as an English and history teacher. I just found World Book encyclopedias. I found popular electronics. I read everything that I could get. But the basic stuff was just me just taking things apart. When I figured out actually how to put them back together and fix them, that was the happy day for everyone in my family. Let's see. Thanks for your time tonight. And no aluminum, David says. Yeah, aluminum wire is kind of evil in houses and such. We don't like that much. So Genevieve also says, is it possible to convert an outlet or two to a USB outlet? The thing is, I've not found one that's shallow enough. If you've already have 12 volts running through, I think it's probably makes more sense to get 12 volts DC over to a little USB outlet that you could put in a round hole. And I did an article over on RV Travel a year or two ago on that. I'll have to look that up and post that. Which would mean you didn't if you did this off of an electrical outlet, you would have to run the inverter to charge your phone. I'm doing some experiments right now, and even the best inverters have a 20 or 30 watt overhead of just sitting there running the fans. Far more efficient if you can get 12 volts pulled over to it and get one of those little double units that fits in that directly charges it. You'll have much less power usage. Stay safe. Okay, so let's see. AC side of the RV can use echoes throughout in the alarm a la carte smart devices, but can't get the lights to work because there are 12 volt source. Someone's need to make a 12 volt switch for the lights. So what you're saying is you can't get it into that. Yeah. But isn't that what PoE does? Can you not? Send me what you got directly. Email me directly what you got, Ryan. This would be an interesting thing because my kids are really smart about this stuff too. They love challenges, and I'm using this as a way. They love the research stuff, so I'm using this as a way for us to kind of go through. But yeah, I think they probably should have, and this gives you the ability to like control lights from a remote from your phone. Basically, the idea of these smart things is you just run power over to them. You don't actually have switches to turn them off. You have some remote control, just like the fan here I have in the room. I can go ahead and change the speed up and down. I don't actually have separate wires going up to that. My little remote is just talking to this. I'm assuming through some sort of Bluetooth link. Yeah, say shortwave. Oh my gosh, Radio Shack shortwave kit. I used to build Heath kits and Dynacos for fun. And I still have a few of them floating around here. But some of my first Rock Band stuff that I built when I was probably 18, 20 years old. This is when building a Dynaco, a Dynakit or a Heath kit was cheaper than buying the stuff. And some of my bands, I had just racks of Dynaco 400 amps to drive really big speakers, like really, really loud, back when I was a youngster. So yeah, I had a Hallicrafters S85 when I was a kid, and I traded it out after I burned a transformer out or something. I don't know why, but I've been getting an urge to get like another Hallicrafters, like an S100. It's a little more tuned up. I don't have time to do any of this. But as I get a little older, I realize that I only have so much time to play with stuff. And I used to love shortwave radio stuff. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I understand it. And a few of my buddies are real ham radio operators, and a number of my colleagues are radio station engineers. So I have people I could talk to and have fun with. I've just got to go ahead and make a little time. So yeah, but again, more hobby stuff, more good stuff. So, okay, so it's 7:58. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Okay, so everybody, we've been here for an hour. Have you had some fun? Continue to add some comment sections in here. I'll update with my direct email here address in an hour or two tonight. But you can send me some more questions directly. And I'll try to do this every week or two, just one of these basic informal things. I do have, remember now, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you haven't signed up already in here, and I'm guessing that if you're getting this, you've already subscribed. Make sure you subscribe and enable the little button on here to get notifications, because we are going to be giving away 3 of the Southwire triple meter kits here next week. All you've got to do is either know all of this stuff, or you just got to watch the little 20 or 30 minute videos, and right inside them they'll have all the answers to the question, like how much power is available from a 50 amp connector, and basic stuff like that. So I have a 3-part video that I had done like the week before, each one being 20 to 30 minutes long or so. And that's part 1, part 2, and part 3 of my normal 60-minute session that the one that I was going to do for FMCA, but sadly couldn't get out there. I'm glad to find stuff. I called up Southwire and said, "Can you send me those meter kits? They're really nice. It's got all 3 of them. Also, if you can pass this around to anybody that you like, spread the word. Share this with everybody, and I will try to do my best to keep you guys safe and learning stuff. And I'm learning stuff continuously. I think this makes me a better engineer to study and learn. It also makes me a better teacher once I see what your questions are. So keep the questions coming. I will post some things in the middle of the week. I haven't determined what the next thing is, but I do have a couple real interesting things I've been testing for the last several weeks. I'm ready to publish. All right, I see. Okay, and let's just end this with this. Jim says, thanks, Mike. Thank you. And happy Easter to all. Yes, happy Easter to all of you. Everybody stay safe and sane. And let me know of any particular topics you want. And I will be there for you. Thank you all. Good night.